Someone once asked me, why do you cut perfectly good fabric into pieces just to sew it back together? My answer: to create great quilt designs. One of the designers that I've had the privilege of working with over the years is Donna Fenske. She's here to share her latest ideas with us. Welcome back, Donna.
Thank you, Nancy. The premise of this program is to use a variety of strips of fabric to create interesting designs. Horizon is the first quilt design. It represents the color of the sky at sunrise or sunset.
Strip by strip, patchwork quilts. That's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America.
Clover, making a difference in sewing, quilting, crafting, and needle arts for over 90 years. Fuller Brush vacuums dedicated to keeping homes clean.
Amazing designs and Class A needles.
With a name like Strip by Strip Patchwork Quilts, you have to realize that almost all the quilts in this designs are starting out with strips of fabric. But what versatility there is. And our first one shows the great use of color that you use, Donna.
On the Horizon quilt here, we used gradated fabric. And we used 5 different gradated fabrics just to show you the gradation. Now this one went from yellow to a lavender purple color.
And then back again.
And back again on the back side. So again, we're using 5 different gradated fabrics.
And when we start with fabric, regardless of the quilting process or sewing process, we always press. And you've used spray.
Right, I starch my fabric ahead of time, and then I press it really well. And then I can do my more accurate cutting.
Straighten it up.
And so I'm going to just take my rotary cutter and I'm going to just align and get it nice and square along the edge here. And I don't want to cut off too much, but we'll just trim up the fabric.
And then after getting a square piece of fabric, we're going to do a lot of cutting. Of these 5 gradated ombre fabrics, however they're called, Donna's going to be cutting many strips.
Right, I'm going to be cutting like a 1-inch strip, a couple of them, 1.5, and then 2.5. And I like the smaller strips because it gave me a variety of interest when I was putting the quilt together. So I'll do a 1-inch strip.
Which we have 2 of them.
So I would do another one, and then also we have a
1.5.
1.5, so I'm going to do a 1.5-inch strip.
And then 3 of the 2.5-inch strips, so that's a third of a yard.
So I'll just cut one of those.
Okay. You know, you're not going to cut at an angle at home.
Yes, yes.
So you have 5 fabrics cut in these various 6 lengths, and then the separation of this quilt is the white or a background fabric, whatever you'd like to choose. And after you've done the cutting and also the background fabric, you're going to just cut it in the various widths. We're going to do a layout and putting all of the fabrics in what we're going to do is create a strata or many layers of strips of fabric.
And what we're doing is we're just kind of working on a flannel background or even a scrap of batting. And we're going to just kind of get interesting combinations of strips together. Now, did you want it vertically or horizontal?
However you want, Donna.
Okay. And I just played and auditioned fabric, see what kind of color combinations I wanted to put together. Maybe I wanted to punch it up with maybe a
like
turquoise color.
Yeah, let's separate it with a white. What do you think?
Yes. And in the book that accompanies this program, we're giving you all of the cuts of fabric that you need to use, and you're going to just continually audition the combinations that you come up with. And you want to use all the strips that we recommend in the book as well.
So here we are starting to, you can see the horizon looking effect that we have. And then we're going to separate these into pairs so that we're going to take this to the sewing machine, sew one pair, the second pair, let's see, we need a third pair here. And here you can see that I'm sewing the pairs together and chain stitching. So as I reach the end of one strip, simply butt the end of the second pair and can just continuously to sew from one to the other. And it takes a while to make some pairs, and we have some shorter lengths of pairs right here.
Right here, I'm going to press a couple of the shorter lengths, and I like to press the seam flat first, and then I'm going to press towards the color strip. I'm going to press my seam allowance towards the color strip, away from the white. And I like to also use a little wooden tailor's clap. What it does, it helps to hold the seam really nice and flat. So I would do the full length of my strips. And then again, after all of the strips are pressed, I then start to assemble them on a bigger surface. And
then you take those two pairs and you sew the two pairs together, and then the 4 strips to another 4-strip section, and pretty soon you have a big piece of fabric.
Right, and you'll notice too that maybe I have 3 colors together in this segment, and if you examine the quilt there might be 4 to 5.
Right.
But anyways, we're using up all of those strips of fabric, and we're going to now create, or we're going to sew this into a tube. We're going to sew along this long edge, and if I was using a full width of fabric, it would be about 45 inches right now.
And if we used all the strips, it would be much longer.
Right.
And then here is a strip or a tube. It's all sewn together. Donna has already straightened the edge of this. We would normally straighten it on the board, but we had it pre-straightened. And then I'll give you the ruler, Donna. You might need that.
Yes, it disappeared for a brief moment. Okay, so
5
now
inches,
5
right?
inches. So I would continually cut 5 inches all the way across my tube, because again we have this fabric sewn into a tube, which is really convenient, because what's going to happen next is I like to sometimes play with, I turn the fabric right side out. You could turn the tube right side out.
But here it's easy, right?
In the beginning. And I like to use the wider spaces of the white. That's where I start to audition my combinations that I might come up with. I simply fold my fabric on a white section, see if I have an interesting look. I will give that a press with my iron. After pressing it, I would just cut on the fold. And now I'm going to be releasing a long length of pieced fabric. So that's how I start to build the different combinations. But then also I needed separation of the color. I felt it was too busy if I would continue to sew these strips together. So we put a little column of the white to divide the group up.
We look back at our finished quilt. You can see how Donna staggered the horizons, and with strips of fabric, ombre fabric, it really makes an impactful quilt design. Choose a variety of batik fabrics with one striking background color, and you're ready to create our next quilt design called Diamond Spectrum. Here to learn how to make a fabric tube from strips of fabric, then creatively cut into blocks. It's an impressive design. When we take a close-up look at the Diamond Spectrum quilt, you wouldn't think that these are all strips of fabric, Donna, but yet you'll be creating blocks, and it's kind of a mystery how this happens.
Yes, and it's a bunch of strips that are sewn together, and then we use a solid color and create a really interesting design.
The batiks, the multicolored fabrics, kind of gave it its name of Diamond Spectrum. You could also use solid fabrics. The choice is yours, but depending upon what fabrics you choose, you get a different look. We think this is a great scrap buster.
Right, it takes about 40 strips of fabric, and what we're going to do is we're going to be sewing them in pairs.
And 2.5-inch strips, lights, mediums, and darks. We happen to have, as we mentioned, all batik fabrics, but you could use solids, whatever, as I mentioned. And then you have sewn them into pairs.
Yes, randomly sewed them into pairs, light and darks, getting a good contrast of color and value.
And then after you have done the sewing of pairs, like before, you sew the pairs together, and then the 4 sections to 4 sections. And with this one, Donna, you stitched until you had
Enough width for like 40 inches.
because the blue fabric is going to be cut 4.5 inches wide. So you'll see in a minute how this is going to work. But after you've sewn 20 strips together, 20 strips together, you're going to fold it in half.
Fold it in half, and then again I would cut a 4.5-inch crosswise strip out of that piece.
You'd square the end, or you'd straighten up the end, and then you just cut 4.5-inch strips, and we'll just kind of make believe. How's that?
Pretend, yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Here's a 4.5-inch strip. And the reason we use 20 strips of fabric, because it equals the magical number of around 40, which is the width of the fabric. And here's the tube. Oh.
So then at this stage we stack the solid onto the piece section and we sew our 1/4-inch seam on either side. Again, we're creating a tube.
So this time the tube is much narrower, very narrow, but you'd create about several of these depending upon the size that you'd like to make. And you're going to cut triangular shapes, and you can use, we have 3 ways to show you. We'll show you 2 right now, and you'll see the 3rd way in a little bit. But let's just start with a half square triangle.
I have put some tape on my ruler at the 4.5-inch mark, and I'm going to align the edge of my fabric with the tool, and I'm cutting quick little triangles.
And it will be so much easier to do this. I don't think you cut that one.
Okay.
On this, when you're not on an angle, as you've heard us say before. Okay, perfect.
And then with this ruler, if I wanted to cut the next one, I would have to flip it
Or rotate it over, yes.
and reposition and cut along that edge.
And Donna, use the fabric in a very economical way. Got that ruler over as far as possible. What you're going to see at the tip is that there's going to be some thread there because the seam was stitched. So with the seam ripper, with a little scissors, it almost wants to come out by itself, but just do a little extra clipping. And then, da-da, there is your block and all strips.
We have a second tool that can cut continuous half square triangles. So we align the dark edges with the edge of the fabric, and it has die cuts in it. So I'm going to
little teardrops.
Little teardrops, and again, I'm cutting along both sides.
Great.
And then I would just constantly reposition the ruler and advance it down the strip and cut all of those wonderful squares.
So you get 2 for 1. So there are 2 of the ways that you can cut your triangular shapes to make the blocks. We have found the easiest way for pressing is to press the seam allowances toward the dark fabric, toward the solid fabric, because then you're not worrying about pressing those seam allowances back on themselves. Now, there are several designs you could create, but we like this diamond spectrum look. Down, I'm going to give you half of the stack.
So we're going to start with the solid in the center, creating a square.
You know what? I'm going to switch out this one so it's not matching.
Okay.
There. How about that?
And what we're trying to achieve is creating another square around the center square. And I'm going to flip and continue to advance to create squares.
And you're going to use traditional quilting techniques of placing column 2 onto column 1 and sewing the side seams. And then after creating columns, you can create rows. But I think you can kind of see the concept of this. We're going to take a look again at the full-size quilt because I'm a fan of things being asymmetrical, and Donna did that in this design. You can see that the diamond is canted
off to one side. It adds a lot of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I kind of like working in kind of throw size
Lap quilt.
quilts because it adds a lot of interest by making one and adding it to your decor.
You can change out very easily by making this diamond spectrum quilt with scraps of fabric. Many fabrics cut to the same size are all that's needed to create the project Sunset Streams. Even though simplicity is the key to the process, the final result packs a lot of wow factor. Next, learn Donna's modern quilt making techniques. Batiks, Donna, must be your favorite fabric.
Yes, I
to
enjoy
know them.
working with them.
And you can see that she has a variety of batiks separated again with some columns, and this is the block.
Right, and I like working with fabrics that separate the rows because I don't have to match anything.
Very good point. This block, believe it or not, has many of the same characteristics as our previous quilt technique, but we'll first show you this technique, and the key width here is
It's 2.5 inches.
So 2.5 inch crosswise strips of many coordinating fabrics.
This is really great too with pre-cut packages that are 2.5 inch strips, so it's really friendly for those as well. And we're coming with using 2.5 inch strips, a variety of them, range of colors, so we get really good
light, medium, dark.
Yes. And then also we selected a fabric for the division of the columns.
Sure. Now pairs again are needed when you're going to be sewing a light to a dark.
Yes, and then also if you stack them, we're going to be creating a tube.
So we're going to make 2 pairs, and then the pairs become a unit. So kind of put 4 fabrics together that you like, and then...
And a lot of times too, I kind of nest the seam allowances. Here I'm going to press the seam allowances to one side or the other, so that when I create a tube, they nest very well, and then I'm going to sew along either side of the strips. Again, we're creating a tube of fabric.
So the tube happens a little faster than our last technique. We don't have to subcut the strips, we just sew 2 pairs together. And then we're going to again cut blocks using a variety of techniques. You could use one of the 2 rulers we showed you earlier, or just a square ruler.
Right, and this square ruler, I just again added a row of tape where I wanted the proper dimensions, because this I'm going to be creating like a 4.5 inch triangle or block when I'm completed, when all of the cutting is completed. And again, the tip of the...
Let's get it one more.
Yes, I'm not very strong at cutting upside down, so I apologize for that.
There you go.
So again, we do need to remove a little stitching at the top of our block, which I'm going to cheat.
And presto, it works.
Right.
And then just kind of sew some pairs together, maybe not getting the same fabric combinations. Yes.
Here we're going to just stack a few together.
And I'll clip these apart. And you can kind of lay it out how you'd like to.
And we're working in a vertical fashion when we're actually assembling these when they're all done.
So sew some pairs of the blocks together, then put them in a row.
And again, like I said earlier, I don't have to match when I am attaching it to a column like this of fabric.
So you can see really quite how quickly that goes together. When we worked with our previous one, we used crosswise strips and then put a solid, but this way we're using all strips, but you don't always have to use batiks.
Right, you could use just solid fabrics. We created a little sample here that showcases working with solid pieces of fabric, and again we have a solid column to divide everything as well.
Gives your eyes some rest. So whether you want to have the modern look with solid fabrics and separating them with gray or black or whatever color you want to have as your neutral, or you're working with a variety of batiks, this really does have an interesting feel for it. And if you're a beginner quilter, this is it. No matching, as Donna said. You don't have to get seams that align, and you have a dramatic, interesting design. When the mom of today's Nancy's Corner guest lost her sight, there was a double loss, the ability to see as well as the ability to sew. Learn how this tragedy turned into a blessing. Please welcome Tammy Roussel, who joins us from Lowell, Massachusetts, and is the founder of Mitzi Kits, the touch-based sewing ministry. Welcome to Sewing with Nancy, Tammy.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is a very fascinating way of sewing, and could you explain to our viewers the sewing with touch, the sewing when you don't have the ability to sew?
Sure. So as you mentioned, it definitely was a blessing. My mom lost her eyesight in her 80s and became very depressed. And so I was searching for a way to help her to sew again, to re-engage her. And so we had discovered that by applying a tactile border to all of our fabric, around all of the perimeters, so creating the sewing guideline, that she could sew by touch. And so we've created this as a kit.
And you started with a simple patchwork design, and by touch you can see that or feel the seam allowances, match them up, and that changed your mom's life, or her attitude, I should say.
Absolutely. It was definitely a prayer answered. I was so amazed to see how it uplifted her spirits and just to see the quality of the work she was able to produce. She produced quilts for our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, now some great nieces and nephews. So it's been amazing.
But your mom is not the only person who has benefited from your devising this way of sewing.
Correct, Nancy. So what was also very insightful to us after we brought this to senior centers and some low vision centers was the discovery that every senior, whether they were sighted or not, enjoyed the process, mainly because it's very easy to use. They can use it in a group, and they can produce very quick quality results.
The interesting thing is that you can use a plastic needle, is that correct?
Correct. So we've designed the kits now, we've evolved to have various levels of complexity. So we have one kit that is useful with a plastic needle and ribbon, and we take fleece and we put drill holes into the fleece so that people can simply weave a ribbon with a plastic needle through and create their pillow.
Your mom's name is Mitzi, and you've named this program, this process, after your mom, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And you have over 20 types of kits, which you've started this in 2015, so that's really remarkable in a very short period of time.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's really been indicative of what the folks that we visit with say they would like to do. So we've learned through all of our experiences. And I'd also like to mention one of our latest learnings was that of the memory impaired. So folks who could no longer sew because they've forgotten how to sew. And we bring this kit to them, and it's amazing to see they just pick it right up and love what the results are in their quality of life improvement.
You know, we think of sewing, when you say quality of life, so often, depending upon where we are in our life, whether we're sewing for someone else, you have the giving spirit, it passes time. We need that creative fulfillment. So whether you're sighted or not, you've made it possible for people to continue their love of sewing. I'm impressed and amazed.
Thank you, thank you. As I said, I feel very blessed and love seeing the smiles every day that come out of it.
And your mom, you said, has made quilts for her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. That's impressive.
Yeah, they love it too.
Tammy, I'm sorry. On behalf of your mom, Mitzi, and what you have done for people who would like to continue their love of sewing throughout their life, thank you for being so creative in your endeavor.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate the time.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you to Tammy, and also thank you for watching Sewing with Nancy during our first program of strip-by-strip patchwork quilting. Next time, Donna Fensky will be back to continue our second program of the series. You can watch more Sewing with Nancy online at nancyzieman.com, where all of our programs are available, and also join us on social media. Thank you for joining me. Bye for now.
Nancy and her guest Donna Fensky demonstrate easy piecing techniques to create dramatic quilts and distinctive table runners. Get the book with instructions for 6 different patchwork projects, plus a DVD of highlighted tips for $19.99, plus shipping and handling. To order, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/3107. Order item number BD3107, credit card orders only. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzieman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Fuller Brush Vacuums, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Riley Blake Designs. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.